Sweet Taste of Cake, Chapter 4, Parting of the Ways, by The Descendant. As much as they had wanted to spend this time together, just the two of them in the scent of the gingerbread and the warmth of the oven, the simple fact was they had other duties to attend to at the time. It was heartwarming eve, and the regular customers began to enter. So he went off to see their needs. As they did, those with special holiday orders began to arriving too, each one asking for their treasures. He listened to her adorable voice ring out, speak familiar names that answered her with holiday greetings, many even calling him out to the counter. He replied, his voice filling the room for the first time that morning, exchanging with them wishes of happiness. He saw her still running back and forth, fetching the orders, and soon he sought to assist her. She stopped him at the door, gently placing her hoof to his chest. He looked down at her with a puzzled look. At once, she lifted her hoof and pointed out the frosting that sat absolutely on his nose. He looked at her cross-eyed once more, and they giggled in tune. It would hardly have to do with letting the public see him so adorned, even if it had a holiday flair. He consented to let her deal with those in the shop beyond while he returned to working on the gingerbread house, letting his wife see to the customers. Sometimes, they knew, you have to be apart from those you would have to rather be very near. But this was one of the many lessons they had learned in their lives together, one that would sadly repeat itself. Garrett awoke early, made his way to the first to the bathroom, and then down the small hallway. He paused at the top of the stairs and listened at the door of the bedroom. A breath lingered there, still sounding out too peacefully even as the dawn broke through the house. With a sigh of relief, he went down the stairs on silent hooves. The early morning light of the summer day caught across all the items that he had made the night before. He glanced over them one more time and began to pack away the containers. Slowly, he pieced all the baked goods within the saddlebags and turned to make himself breakfast. As always, he made her some too, with the small meal sitting there, possibly for hours. Today, there was some small movement at the top of the stairs caught his ears. He gathered up his saddlebags. Her host came down the stairs to the kitchen. "Oh, you're leaving already?" Came a drawn-out voice, one that seemed almost worn away. "Today was the day you were telling me about, right? I didn't want to miss it. Today is your last day at the mill, right?" He turned to face the white mare and gave her a smile. "Yeah, Mom. Today is my last day," Garrett said as he looked up to him. "Okay, I didn't want you to buy anything, she began. Garrett looked down and saw how lost she seemed, almost floating around in her own thoughts. "That's okay, Mom. You don't need to buy me anything for my last day on the job," he answered as he forced a small laugh. "If you like to, you could buy me something when I open my bakery." At the mention of the shop, her eyes rose to meet his. The lines beneath them wrinkled into a small smile and then deflated. As they did, her head fell lower and her entire frail-seemed frame seemed highlighted by it. "Mom," he said as his host sounded out across the old familiar floorboards. Mom? Are you going to be alright with me moving out? You haven't said much about it since I told you I closed on the bake shop." It's only natural for a cult to want his own space," she said, her eyes moving from side to side, seeming to look at everything in the room except for him. "Especially when he has a male friend." "Cupcake's been asking about you," he said, lowering his head to look at her. Would you like to meet her?" The question caught his mother's eyes back up. An expression of happy surprise grew there. "Do you mean it? I mean, you don't have to, but you do. I'd love you to meet her," exclaimed the older mare. "Stein, would you want her to meet me?" Garrett stepped forward, laid his head on her withers. With a sound of relief, she lifted her own head to the withers of her tall son, letting it rest upon the amber-colored coat. "Of course, Mom," he said as he released her. "I'd love for you to meet you. I'm sure she'll think you're great." She stood there, running her hoof up and down his foreleg, her smile still evident even as she began to lower her head once more. "Breakfast is on the table," Garrett said, motioning to the little meal that sat on the dinette set. "Banana bread and some fruit. Don't let it sit and dry up, okay?" "I have such a good son," she said, taking a step back as he opened the door. "So thoughtful of his old mother." "Have a good day, Mom." I love you," he said, trotting out into the warm air of the summer morning. "I love you too, Cat. Have a good last day," she replied as he looked at her over his shoulder. He watched him trot down the road to the corner. Then he was gone. She stood in the doorway for a while after that, feeling the heat of the morning, and then slowly closed the door. She walked slowly back into the kitchen to study the breakfast that the colt had made for her. Cheesecake sat over the meal, looking down upon it. He had made it for her, as he always had, and now all she could do was stare at it. Of course he had made it for her. He had made her breakfast, and often dinner, for years. If he had not learned to bake, they probably would have both starved to death. He had earned his mark out of need, not pleasure. If he had not learned to bake, he would have gone off to school most mornings with an empty stomach. The morning he had earned a cutie mark that stood upon him, perhaps the most important moment in the life of a pony. She had been upstairs asleep in her bed with some stallion whose name she could not even remember. She looked down at the banana bread, the slices of cantaloupe and melon, the perfect presentation laid out for her by a colt who loved her. In a flash, all the stallions who had passed through her life could say that about drove through her mind. Her father, Carrot, and Carrot's father. She stared back down into her breakfast and saw it already turning dry at the edges as it sat in the sun that streamed in through the windows. As she did, she thought about her freckled, amber-colored colt once more. Despite all that she had put him through, he still loved her. He still wanted her to be a part of his life as it unfolded. And now, she wanted to give him something. To be the mother that she should have been. She had nothing left to give. As Cheesecake stared down at the plate, small tinkling sounds rose from it as she realized that it was the time of her own tears striking the surface. And of course, I brought the most expensive one. Oh, of course, mouthed Cupcake, placing the butter and cream back among the small mountain of ice. Soon she slid down the line of the buffet, adjusting the small items here and there. To her disgust, the stallion had followed along just as he had been since Cupcake had heard him mention her name, and the name of one of her father's businesses. As the breakfast began to wind down, she looked to her employer, Knops, as he walked down among the guests of the country club, chatting with them as she gathered up the used plates and old glasses. As this arrogant colt continued to go on and on and on about his lifestyle in a vain attempt to impress her, Cupcake could already sense where he was going, and already knew that he would show his cards early. As she poured some juices for the older ponies, she tried to return to her smiles. But as this conceited colt continued his diatribe, he completely misread every signal she sent him. She wished Knops would come over, simply give her some orders that took far away from the colt, perhaps out into the cart to put away plates, or begin gathering up all the tools that the caterers had brought with them from the Knops shop. Instead, all she could do was stand there and mouth little responses to the colt's statements about his wealth, his family's aristocratic background, and made little non-committal statements in reply as she wiped her hose across the black apron. Oh yes, she would say, her eyes focusing far away. Oh, certainly. Very good, he answered. Saturday then. What? Asked Cupcake, snapping back to attention, an awful realization striking her. When shall I pick you up? He asked, his eyebrows arching in something he may soon resembled the pose of seduction, but was instead resembled the pose taken by those having some sort of stroke. I'm sorry, no, she exclaimed, her hope coming to her mouth. I'm sorry, I must have misunderstood. I can't. No, sorry. Excuse me, I must speak with my supervisor. At once she began to walk away. To her horror, he followed. As the last few ponies departing to breakfast went past her, she heard him calling to her. Maybe Sunday then. You know, I am familiar with your family. Cupcake's legs buckled slightly. But what seemed like 1,000th time in her life, a young stallion betrayed his real interest in her. And I'd love to meet your father. I have a real knack for business, and an awful shock went along her body, a feeling of revulsion that swept through her. As shown in slow motion, she turned and looked back to see this cold swift upon her, literally grabbing for her as he saw his chance for personal advancement and escaping his charms. Don't touch me! She brayed about. Don't you dare touch me! At once, the sound of crassy silverware arose from the room. Knops, her fellow employee serving spoon, and few remaining patrons of the breakfast looked to where Cupcake stood, the stallion hovering close by. No! I said no! Leave me alone! She cried as she turned and ran, actually giving a small kick as a wild horse would, not equestrian in both form and biology. As Cupcake pelted through the distant glass doors that lined the large sunlit room, the stallion turned and looked over at the viewpoints within. Seeing none that he considered a threat to his status, he let a small smirk escape his lips. That's funny, he said to the room at large as he departed. The fat ones usually appreciate being chatted up. Serving Spoon heaved with nausea at the statement. With a nod to Knops, he went out to see Cupcake. Cupcake had run far out into the grounds of the country club. She knew that coming here had been a mistake. She had been here too many times with Irie. Too many ponies knew how powerful and well off her father was, even if few knew him personally. She should have gone with hors d'oeuvres, Knops' partner. She should have solicited with one of the other employees gone to carry the event up the hill and carrot lot. Instead, she had been chosen this one, because she had hoped to be the one time to get to Carrot's party at the mill. But that hope had fled away as the ghost slowly ate and taught as Knops agreed to take on lunch as well. Now she simply found a large tree to lean against as she shook. Before long, the voice of Serving Spoon echoed across the manicured lawns. She looked up to see him trip slightly as he stepped upon the golf balls and upon the putting green. I'm over here! She called, giving a small sob as he did. With that, he trotted over and stood with her, knowing that all he really needed was someone close by. Serving Spoon himself was in love, in a relationship that was flowering, and together they had compared notes. The cult knew that feelings were welling inside her, so he stood with her, and then sat where he sat, awaiting Knops. Before long, Knops saw Serving Spoon stand. He waved his foreleg across the air, and soon the older mare was with them. Serving Spoon, she asked, was your cat scared start getting the lunch buffet ready? Sure, he said. Sure. He started to move with his foreleg, and a look of worry fallen over him. He lay down and asked, Cupcake? She smiled up at him, and with that he smiled was off. Oh, Knops, I'm so sorry. After my outburst, after that, I'll never hire you again, said Cupcake, placing her head across the lap of this older mare. Nothing, sorry, nothing, my dear, said the wide voice of the unicorn. After that, they owe you an apology, if anything. The silence hung there. Do you want me to report him to the club manager? He shouldn't have touched... No, replied Cupcake, turning her head to look over the green lawns and fairways beyond. No, he wasn't any different from all the rest, don't you know? All the cults just want something from me. They're close to my father. Something is away to... Cupcake trailed off. She knew that almost all of them had only seen her as a prospect. In her mind, she saw all of their opportunistic faces, all of those cults, and she shuddered at the thought of their horrible little plans for her. Instead, she made a list of all the cults and stallions that loved her without question, who knew her. Her grandfathers, her father, her brothers, and Carrot. There's only one cult who loves me for me, she said, blinking the wetness as wet rolled down her face and into the black apron of her employer. Only one cult who doesn't want anything from me. Your cult friend, eh? Replied the older mare as she fixed Cupcake's hair with her magic. I'm happy that you found a pony like that, Cupcake. It's so wonderful. Oh, Knops, I want to be with him right now, said Cupcake as she looked into the blue sky. In her mind, she felt countless forelegs around her, driving the remembrance of the foreign, revolting grasp of the arrogant colt from her body. She felt his presence falling over her and imagined him near her, thought of herself in his reassuring embrace. I want you to be holding me right now. I want my cat. Well, I think Serving Spoon and I could manage if you needed to head off, said Knops as she gently patted the young mare on the head. Cupcake raised herself up and wiped her eyes with the back of her hoofs. No, she said softly, looking to Knops. I promised you I'd stay and... Are you sure? Asked the older mare, rising to her hoofs. Yes, I'm sure, answered Cupcake. Knops stared at her for a second, and then spoke to her in happy, contemplative tones. Cupcake, when Ivory asked me to take you on, I was at first a little suspicious, especially since you can imagine you're going to be my competition someday. Cupcake raised her head and wondered where the conversation was going. But You've been nothing but an asset to me from the day you started. I know that you're using the money to help your cult friend start a business, and, well, I'd like to say I wish you the best, both of you. If you feel strongly for him, he must be something special. Cupcake smiled back, leaned in to hug her employer. With that, the two went off to see lunch. Trammell pulled to safety. It was no accident or scene of lovey-dovey frou-frou nonsense as had been witnessed upon the bagging floor in the past that caused him to do so. Instead, today was a day to be celebrating, and it was the time for the festivities to begin. Up to it, lads! We need to find our substance and characterize the Lebanon, so all of you are not downstairs! With that, Carrot pulled his very last bag of flour from beneath the spigot, placed it upon the containers, and watched it disappear down into the bowels of the mill with a certain pride and a small smile on his face. Even as he left the bagging stall for the last time, other colts and fillies were already around him, and some suds, making little signs of appreciation and waking them up, wishing them luck. Soon, almost all had disappeared down the stairs. As Carrot looked on at Trammell, consecrating some suds for finding something to match his mark, and with that too, he went down the stairs. Trammell turned to Carrot and smiled at him. Now come now, my fine fellow. Can hardly have a party without one of the guests of honor, now can we? Carrot returned to smile and looked up at the stallion. Trammell, he said slowly, I just want to, huh? What's this about? Asked Trammell, giving a nervous laugh. Carrot sighed and continued. Trammell, he said, once again attempting the line of thought as he begun, I never knew my dad. My grandfather died a few years ago, and I just want to say it's been great. It's been great having an older stallion I could ask about things, you know. To ask about things, how it will all be going along, Cupcake. I just want to say thanks. Trammell chuckled. Did not know how he felt being called an older stallion, but he understood. Carrot was being genuinely grateful. All that needs to be said about what happens next is awkward guy hug. And the two went down the stairs as well. With that, Carrot embraced the strings of causality around him and closed the chapter of his life that would involve bagging stall. As the party continued, Lizard reflected upon the table that spread before him. Normally, when workers in this mill left during the summer in pursuit of their marks, it was the ice cream that disappeared first, and the cake and cookies and suds were the ones left simmering in the midday sun. As he lifted his head along the picnic table, he saw the order reversed. Today, it was the products of young Mr. Carrot Cake, now leaving his employ, which had been anxiously gathered by those who now sat on the blankets, and it was the ice cream that was in danger of melting. He looked up to see the cult gathering up plates and saying his goodbyes. Lizard saw his daughter Ivory speaking with the various workers too. All too soon she would be leaving him and her mother, departing their big house where she had lived all of her life, and off to her internship in Canterland. As he pondered the fact that his little filly was so grown up, he suddenly felt the need to ingest as much ice cream as he could get away without seeming like a glutton. He listened to as he heard two ponies she had spoken about talk about her. That filly's a little too smart, you know. Clever pony, that one. She'll be running all her father's mill inside a decade. Ha! The mill? Mark my words. She'll be running all of Pony Mill! Lizard almost choked on his ice cream when he tried to eat it and laughed at its statements. His daughter was smart. Smart enough to know that running the mill was not her forte. Politics, however? Mr. Lizard, sir? Lizard put down the tub of vanilla ice cream and turned to Carrot with a wide smile and offered hoof. Well, Carrot my coats, he says as he shook hands. Turning out then? Best of luck. Do not hesitate to ask if you need anything. I mean anything. Thank you, sir. I really appreciate it. The bonus check was almost too generous, said Carrot, lifting his head and trying to show his appreciation through a wide smile. Same as any pony who gets from me when they go off to make their cutie mark my coat. Lizard said, leaning in deeper. Carrot, best of luck of everything. And I mean everything. It took Carrot a second to get the draft, but when he did, he smiled once more. Thank you, sir. I'm hoping for the best in that regard, too. With that, Carrot completed his goodbyes, and with one last long look upon the brick structure, he departed the mill. As he crossed around the building, he came to the bridge. Something spun through him as his hooves hit the planks. At that moment, he realize he was actually unemployed. Until that bakery was open, he would have no income. He stopped on the bridge to listen and watch the big mill go round and round with wet sounds. He looked down into the mill pond and felt the river flowing through it. There he saw reflections of an amber-colored colt staring up at him. Freckles, underbite, thin, all of the old worries flowed through him, all of the uncertainties. He was taking a risk. He was going out into the world pilotless, knowing only that he knew how to bake and hoping that if he got the business going well, she would be finally able to let go. Whatever this was, the thing that Cupcake was keeping a secret from him, he hoped against hope that it would end when she saw that he would make it. And as she stared into the reflection, he hoped he could prove that he would provide for her, for them, and that he was willing to do anything for her. And with that, all would be possible. Carrots down on the mill wheel splashed about. At once he was puzzled. A new reflection had appeared there. After an instant pondering, he knew who it was. He turned to her. "Oh, Miss Ivory, I'm sorry, I was just..." he began. "Carrot," she said, tilting her head as her forelegs rested on the trailing debris. "You've known me for these many, many months. Been dating my best friend, and you still can't bring yourself to call me Ivory. I had hoped by this point you'd be an Ive." "Oh, really? You never told me I could. You see..." He spoke, returning to standing on the bridge. She sighed as he did the same. "Walk with me, will you, cat?" she asked. And with that, the strings of causality stretched and pulled him away from the mill towards a dim path that led to a beautiful horizon. The two went down into Ponyville, many ponies stopping to greet Ivory. Some even smiled at Carrot and spoke with him as well. Even though he could not remember meeting them, they all somehow seemed to know him. He nodded politely as Ivory introduced him. Within him a realization grew. He gave a small gasp. These were players. They were pieces in the game of this. Together, they watched as the warm summer afternoon played out around them. "Miss Ivory," he said, watching her grimace as he used her title once again, I want to thank you for all you've done for me, getting the shop ready for Cupcake and I." Ivory nodded her head. It was obvious, of course, what she had been doing all along. She had noted back at the table at the dance hall, had seen Ivory guiding Cupcake towards him all along. Now as they stood outside his shop, he could only ask why. He looked up into the improvised sign above the door, opening soon. It read in bold front, "Carrot Cakes Bakery Company, LLC, Incorporated." He looked up to see a dubious wrinkle across the air. I'm going to think for a better name," he stated. "Yes, that would be for the best." He opened the door, was a little embarrassed to see how cluttered and unprepared everything was. Ivory looked up as something metallic rang out. With the timing of the bell, his bonus check dropped into the cash register. It was an older note, large, heavy, and seemingly made out of brass. Carrot sat up all night teaching himself how to make it work as magic. How did anyone expect their host to use tiny keys? Somehow it did open at his awkward touch, and he looked down, and he was rather pleased to see something actually inside the door apart from some paper clips and a dust bunny. "Miss Ivory?" he asked, blanching a little as she sighed at the use of her title once more. I have to ask, why would you tell me you tried so hard to get Cupcake and I together?" "Because you use proper language, Cupcake and I," she said with a smirk. Carrot was a touch confused. He walked away slowly from behind the counter and joined Ivory, looking through the windows of the shop. Ponies went by, happy in their routines, enjoying the summer's day that filled with the cake with stifling human air. "Cupcake is my dearest friend, Carrot," Ivory said, not looking away from the window, but still gazing down into the street. "She has been since her family and I became close. We went to private school together. I've spent almost all our free time together. I know her better than any pony, especially her own family." Carrot turned to look at her. He marveled at how easy her words were for this mare, how calmly she was able to express her ideas, how quickly she was able to add flourish and emphasize her meaning. Perhaps politics would work for her. "She's clever, sneaky when she needs to be, decisive. Always been fond of that part for her. And I see in you that you appreciate that too," she said, not moving her head. He nodded. "None of the other colts did," she said, her voice breaking slightly. Ivory startled herself. She so excitedly turned to face Carrot. She pondered the look he was wearing. Soon she realized he was reflecting on a phrase she had uttered. The other cults. "You're not like them, Carrot," she said as she sat, carefully choosing her words. "I know you see. From the moment I saw your jaw drop open as you walked by on your first day at the mill, I've been getting to know you." Carrot's eyes arched high. "Forgive me," she said, looking away from deep into the shop. She looked back at him and saw him nod. The understanding part of him that she knew Cupcake adored was still there. You're aware, of course, about Cupcake keeping certain aspects of her life from you?" She spoke quietly. And Cecil was surprised he gave a self-conscious laugh. "Yeah, I call it the game of this. I don't know what this thing is, but I know it's important to her, so I'll play it. I'll play as long as it takes," he said, turning his own head to look over the street, "until she feels it's safe to stop." "Yes," replied Ivory after a short while. "That's an excellent metaphor for a cat." He smiled back at her. As the two sat there, the sunlight fell across them, and a single green and blue fly bumbled its way across the plane of glass, swinging humming. "Cat," she spoke, "the game?" He looked at her, wondering deeply if he had somehow lost control of his metaphor. "To win the game, Cat," she continued, "all you have to do is be yourself. All she wants and needs from you is to know that you're not like other cults. The cults who saw her as something they could use. You're set up to win. Everyone in this town wants you to desperately win. I want you to win. This reader wants you to win. Cupcake needs you to win." His eyes perked up and drew in her words. I know the difficulties you had through your life. Never known your father, your mother's confusing situation. How you had to incessantly raise yourself. How despite these things you've remained you. You've become you, the loving, considering, caring cult. No, the stallion that you are. To his surprise, Ivory inched forward, coming closer to him and raising her head to meet his. "Do not tell Cupcake I said this under any circumstances, but, Carrot, you do not always have to wait for permission. At times, it could be even fatal. The time will come when to win this, as you called it, you may have to let your love guide you." The mare's gray mane shifted, and made her look older, as though she had been thinking about this for months. In the very roots she saw the pink that she hid from the world. "You love her, don't you, Carrot?" she asked. "Yes, I do. I've never loved any mare more," he answered without hesitation. "Then that's all it takes. I leave for my internship in a few weeks. I'm going to be up in Canterlot. I'll be working under a Vice-Chamberlain of Parliament, a VC fancy pants apparently." "I'm so glad for you, Ivory," replied Carrot, now understanding her earlier statement fully. She smiled and gave a conscious laugh to her own. "I leave her with you, Carrot. Cupcake, the one you put first, is going to be hard for you. As without my house, she'll have to, well, that's a secret. But Carrot, no matter how hard it gets, I trust you. I trust in your love for her. And Carrot, there's no pony I trust more with something so dear to me as my best friend." Carrot took a deep breath and looked back to her. Slowly, gingerly, the two leaned together. Ivory was not warm. Her hug not nearly as personal as the one Cupcake gave so willingly. Yet the emotion was there, and Carrot accepted it happily. She asked for no party. Something about the guest list bothered her. Within 3 weeks, Ivory was gone, departing on the morning train along the winding tracks through the mountains to the capital beyond.